nerdy friends, and welcome once again to Fresh Take Culture and Comics. Another fun one coming up for you. Great guest. We're going to get into him pretty quickly. A few things up top. One, I wanted to say thank you for the really positive response that my previous episode has been getting. A lot of you reached out directly, and it was really nice to hear. It was a personal story. It was a fun story, a little bit of a different episode, and obviously we touched upon some, heavier topics too. And so I really appreciated people appreciating it. A lot going on with the channel. I am very excited. A lot of momentum happening here. And we're gonna have a lot of announcements. Here's a few of them. So tonight, we had previously been streaming to YouTube and to Facebook. Tonight's, I believe, the first night we are streaming on Twitch. We're going to continue to grow that platform. We are getting very, very close to publicly launching the Discord server. It's sort of we've got a small little group figuring it out, what channels we want to run, what conversations we want to get in there. And as we tweak that, I'm going to open it up to you guys, our audience, our community, and invite people in for a lot of the great conversations we've been having, and grow that as well. I'm in conversations with a couple different partnerships that, it's too early to talk about, but I think are going to be able to provide you guys with, tools and content and tools to be more thoughtful about pursuing the hobby and be more informed, especially newer collectors, but also some of you vets out there as well. And I think is really going to kind of up our game across the board and bring new eyes and new guests. And then I've just loved seeing the community build. We've got a lot of momentum here, and it's really so rewarding. And I forget sometimes how young this channel is. There's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of love that goes into it, and sometimes it feels like we've been banging away forever. And I think some of that is because the passion and love, the sort of lifelong love I have for comics and cultural content, but we're still so new, and I'm so encouraged by the results and mostly you guys. So before I get to the guests tonight, a couple upcoming guests I just want to talk about. One is later this week. We have Miss Marvel premiering on Disney Plus, which I'm personally very excited about. And I'm going to have a guest, a very special guest, review it with us. And the only thing I'll say is that person is much closer to the target demographic for the audience that show's going for. So I think will give us a truly fresh take and a different voice and perspective as we get into that. I think you guys are going to really enjoy that. I am biased, and that's all I'll say, but you can infer. And then I have, and I can't totally announce this, but coming down the pipe, I have a writer from what many consider, and I'm certainly one of them, from the best season of the best TV show ever, comic book TV show ever. And that's your hint there. But I think you guys are going to really love that. We're going to talk about that person's career, that particular show, and the process of adapting work from the comic to the screen. I think that's going to be delightful. And I will be ready to announce that pretty soon. So that's exciting. So before I bring on my guest, I have one last thing, and then we're going to move. I'm going to bring him in. This wasn't on the agenda, but the Sandman teaser trailer dropped this week. Those of you that are regulars know how much love I have for Sandman, as does our guest. I'm sure we're going to talk about it. It's going to be on Netflix August 5th. And this is for the collectors, and it's not really spec so much as like undervalued issues associated with Sandman. Look, everyone's going to be looking for the key books, and they're going to be priced through the roof. Let me give you some really cool alternate books that I think are worth getting out there and can be found affordably. The first is, this is a little offbeat here, but let's see if I can get it without glare. Calliope Comics presents Musings, Sandman. So that is actually just a comic book review magazine that came out in 1993, but on the cover of issue 1, you have Dream, Sandman, and his siblings from the Endless, Death. Let's see if I can do that. Death, and then Delirium there in the middle. Cool story about Delirium. Delirium, and this is canonical in the writing. Delirium was delight until she indulged too much. That's how Neil Gaiman describes her, and she's actually based on Tori Amos. So if you're a Tori Amos fan, Neil Gaiman and Tori Amos are really close friends, and if you know her, her groundbreaking album Little Earthquakes, there are a number of lyrical references in some of those songs to the Sandman series, to Neil Gaiman. So that's a really fun fact I enjoy quite a bit. So that's one to get, and that's like crazy affordable. DC Currents, you might not remember, much like Marvel Age, was sort of a preview book that DC put out to promote upcoming things. This issue, DC Currents 10, actually has a preview of the Sandman series before Sandman comes out. So for those of you that are interested in, and I don't totally fall into this camp, but some people consider the preview appearances in the comics the first appearance of characters, and that's certainly gotten heat. The most popular example is probably Miles Morales in the previews, and then the Foom issue of X-Men from the 70s. So this is your preview of Sandman universe. Again, really under the radar. And my favorite, this is such a cool book, so slept on, can't recommend it enough. Weird Mystery #1, which is kind of like a horror anthology. I think it's August 73 it came out. That actually has the first appearance of Destiny. It's the eldest of the endless siblings, of Sandman siblings. So most of the siblings premiere in the continuity of Sandman. Destiny does not. Destiny premieres in this book, Weird Mystery #1. And again, like a beautiful old classic book, very affordable. So I'd be on the hunt for these if you want to get in on Sandman in a cool way and build your collection without, paying through the nose. So that's all the preamble I'm going to do on that. We are going to watch the Sandman teaser trailer together with our guest, but let's bring him in first. So a big welcome to first-time guest, Manny, with 60-second reviews. Hello and welcome to A Fresh Take, Manny.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
No problem. And if you feel like you're seeing double, I understand. There are a few aesthetic similarities between the two of us. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'll ask some more pointed questions, but just a little bit. First of all, what's 60-second reviews, and what's your collector origin story? What do you like to collect? Older stuff, newer stuff. How do you pursue your collection?
So my origin story is as simple as I was walking home from high school, hit a deli on the way home, and there was a GI Joe Special Missions. Now,
Mm-hmm.
mind you, before this moment, I knew comic books existed. I just never saw them. I grew up in a mostly Hispanic town. We took over from a Polish community, but for whatever reason, hobby shop really wasn't in the books for this community. So I picked
What
up the
year is
book.
this?
This is 88, 89.
Yeah.
But like,
So thought on hobby shops in a minute, but continue, please.
yeah, yeah. So I pick it up, I come home, and my mom yells at me in Spanish and says, that's a waste of money. That's a pizza, right? And she's not wrong, right? We grew up poor, so to spend money on a comic book and not on food doesn't jive much with my mom. Uh, Funny enough, a short time later, Batman with Tim Burton comes out the summer of '89. My sister's like, "Hey, let's go hit this comic book store." I picked it out in Old Bridge, New Jersey, and it was just there was Legends of the Dark Knight #1. Picked it up, read it. In it was an ad for Emerald Dawn, Green Lantern
Mm-hmm.
#1, which he was my favorite super friend. And then it was just like, well, I bought all those, and then
Love
the
a
series just
Super Friends
ended.
reference.
Yeah, and I just went back and got like all the way back. It was like 2 years worth, 200 to 224, and I was hooked. That was it.
Yeah. So a couple of things that story tells me about. I think there's a really, and this is a big conversation, maybe bigger than we've got time for today. There's something, a really provocative question in there about um, cost of I mean, comics are very expensive now. Were
Mm.
expensive relative before, but relative inflation are very expensive, and can be prohibitive. I think for some people collecting, and I think that's a really important topic as we talk about these stories and the value that they provided, certainly for me growing up, and continue to provide in my life, and what you found from them. I think the other thing that's really interesting, so quick note on your local shops. So super nerdy here, but 1986 is the magic year for comic collecting for local comic shops, right? 86 is when you had equilibrium between the amount of issues that came out as newsstand and the amount of comics that came out as direct. Before then, it was overwhelmingly newsstand. So if you didn't have that corner newsstand, you weren't getting comics. And for the collectors out there who are learning the difference in those, newsstands tend to carry a real big premium on the secondary market because there's fewer of them after 1986. If somebody's listing a newsstand before then, do not pay a premium. It does not mean that there are less of them. They're just trying to get more money from you. So that's an
Correct.
important thing. But yeah, it's really right around that late 80s that you start getting a turning point where the local comic shops start coming up. So yeah, I don't remember when my first one was, but the other thing I'd say, and this is, we're going to touch this, I think, many times, but when I stumbled across your account and so many things were so familiar to me, it is so hard to state how big of a deal that 89 Batman film was. Without that film, all the superhero era that we now are so richly bathed in just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
You had the Superman films, which were great, but they, for whatever reason, did not turn the corner in getting like the Hollywood machine to crank it out. The business that Batman 89 film did was insane. And it's the first time I remember as a kid, the McDonald's cup tie-ins and the lunch boxes from not from the comics themselves, but from the media, the big summer promotion.
So the big thing was there was you had Superman 1, 2, 3, right? Even 3 was decent. And then there was a bunch of Hollywood
4 was a
just
treat.
duds. Swamp
Yeah.
Thing, you had Howard the Duck. So you
That's
had
right.
studios, you had Fantastic Four and Captain America, which was being shot, but it was like B-roll footage.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
early Marvel films are rough.
yeah, so you had those, and it was risky. Plus, you're giving it to a relative unknown in Tim Burton at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was popular for his stop motion animation stuff, but behind a whole big budget studio, I mean, there was so much risk behind it.
Yeah. Do you know my favorite trivia about that film? And there's a lot. I highly recommend people. First of all, just go watch it if you haven't seen it. It's so good. The most iconic thing to come out of the movie was Nicholson as the Joker.
Yes.
He had been talked about associated with that Batman property for almost a decade. They had been trying to get it off the ground before Tim Burton was even involved. And then by the time they got momentum on it, he didn't want to do it. And he was sort of like in negotiation, but wasn't really da da da. And they offered it to Robin Williams. And Robin said yes. And they were going to move forward with Robin Williams on it. And Nicholson heard that Robin Williams said yes, went back and said, no, I'll do it. And created a really then Robin Williams was really bitter about it.
Yeah.
Nicholson got at the time, maybe there's something comparable now with like what Robert Downey Jr. got with Iron Man, but like a groundbreaking contract with like, a huge piece of the pie. But the movie that Robin Williams then did, because he was freed up, was Dead Poets Society. So it's an incredible Hollywood sliding doors moment.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I'm again just kind of nerding out. So tell me, so growing up in your neighborhood, in your peer group, did you have any friends that read comics? Did you feel like you were like kind of isolated in your own bubble with them?
It was strange, right? So, Perth Amboy was overwhelmingly Hispanic, right? We still had a couple pockets of uh, low income white, low income black, uh, and it was like the people didn't mix, right? And if you were a white boy, you were smoking cigarettes, listening to heavy metal, and that was
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
If you were Hispanic, you were considered a mira mira because you're bilingual. You're over on this side talking, and like all everyone else was like a homeboy wearing like b-boy stuff, listening to rap music. And for whatever reason, I was able to just move in between all of them, right? I loved heavy metal. I loved rock. I loved skateboarding. I loved playing hacky sack. Um, as much as I love going to the B. Dalton bookstore and getting the most recent Dragonlance book.
Pizza
So
Dragonlance. Ah, dude, speaking of my
I,
heart.
I I found
Speaking of my
I
heart.
found myself just isolated because other Hispanic kids were not reading Dragonlance. They
Hmm.
weren't interested in rock music. And so yeah, it was a strange time. But that's what the 80s were, right? The 80s where you kind of blazed your own path and that's who you were.
Mm. It's interesting, obviously I don't have the specific cultural history, but it does um mirror to some extent what what I always think is so fascinating. Like, did you ever think the sort of like niche thing that was comic books would become this massively broadly accepted like media empire? It's really wild. Now, there's certainly moments in pop, that cartoons would hit or like certain characters would break out. There were definitely Spider-Man moments and Batman moments, but like that, there's no, oh yeah, I'm into comic books isn't like a weird thing at all. I don't know exactly what my question is. Did that what was experiencing like that when you already kind of felt like you were in your own bubble in the hobby?
Um, it boy, that's a great question. It
It's a little loaded.
what I found is the way that you and I found each other, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
way that we follow each other on TikTok or whatever platform we're on. Once we find each other, we're now a community. And it's like molecules floating in space and eventually they just come together and you know for that moment they mesh.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to the comic book store like MC Comics in Old Bridge, and the owner, Chris, he and I just meshed, and it was just like he would say, "Hey, I got a Hulk 181. It's
Mm.
it's in rough shape," and I'm like, "Do I care that it's in rough
Yeah,
shape?
right, right,
I'll be
right,
more
right.
than happy to." And I mean, a lot of my older Silver Age books, they're rough because Chris was just like, "I got a whole bunch of rough books.
Mm.
How much? A buck a piece. I'll
Yeah,
take them
I'm
because
very
I
pro
didn't
reader
care."
copy. Yeah,
Yeah, I,
yeah.
I never ever cared personally about uh, collecting for down the road. I didn't think about that. I always thought I want to read the story. And there weren't
Mm.
trade paperbacks, there weren't
No,
omnibuses.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you had to go back and get the issues. And reader copies for a buck, I was in every time.
Are you did you so okay, so take me back. So sorry. So you got the Emerald Dawn and the Batman. Uh,
Right.
What's the escalation? Like at what point are you a collector? And then what does that look like?
That's a great question because I talked about this in on my 60-second review page.
Mhm.
What I always considered uh you're a gatherer, right? You're reading stories. You're no different than somebody going to the bookstore and buying the new James Patterson book. You're going for a book. The moment that your collection becomes larger than a bread box, where things actually have value,
Mm-hmm.
you are now a collector.
Mm.
And what happened to me was it was winter of 1990 going into 91 where I lost all control. Everything was X-Men at that point because I had a friend, he
Oh,
was just like, "You need to
X-Men
read
was
X-Men." I'm
everything.
like,
X-Men was everything then.
but I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
Because I was just new. So 1 year in, it's like, here's X-Men. I'm like, Well, now I need to get every X-Men.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. And at the time you're looking, what was it, 260, 270,
Mhm.
which wasn't that far, right? That's like a decade to go back to get everything, that was important. So yeah, that's
Post the 94 new team or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I said this on my previous video. Like, I just don't think there's almost no way to convey to somebody looking at the modern market from the comic book side how big the X-Men were. They were bigger than whatever you think. It was Spider-Man, Batman, and X-Men essentially carried an entire industry for a decade. Okay. And
What's
that's not
also
an
funny,
exaggeration.
they also miss out. It was X-Men and New Teen Titans from 79 through
Mm,
86. They competed for the top book. When the
I didn't know that.
X-Men got Kitty Pryde,
Yeah.
the Teen Titans introduced Tara, and they
Mm,
made her bad on purpose because they
mhm.
didn't want to be a cookie cutter of Kitty Pryde. Um, so yeah, they those two literally carried Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man.
In general, the history of DC and Marvel ripping each other off is like one of my favorite. Like, somebody should write just that book somewhere. Maybe that's actually a good episode to do. But it's like, Thanos, Dark Side, Submariner, Aquaman, like,
Right,
Black Cat, Catwoman, like whatever. And it goes back and forth, who grabbed what character from who.
right.
And it was pretty shameless. Like, it's pretty blatant.
They
So
they
yeah, all good.
the the Hulk was from Solomon Grundy. Was
Was it
big.
really? I didn't know that. That
Yeah,
makes, of
yeah.
course, it makes total sense. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but Marvel always found a way to make the characters rooted in
Mm,
in in our world, right? DC always, to me, better stories, but it's always rooted in a fantasy world. Gotham, Keystone City, Coast City.
yeah,
I think
I
that's
totally,
always been a mistake.
yeah, I agree with this. I've talked about this actually many times. I clearly lean Marvel pretty heavily. And then I even kind of go indie, other than, ironically, because you brought it up, other than I will go through runs where I'm very in on Batman and then dip out. I will go through runs where I'm very in on Green Lantern. But generally, like, broadly speaking, I'm mostly a Marvel and indie guy. And for a while I struggled. Now I get it. But why was that the case? And it wasn't like I preferred that in the media or anything, just like literally reading the comics. And I think it is that Marvel, and Stanley talks about this very publicly. Marvel wanted the world we lived in reflected in their books. So Peter Parker was gonna be a bullied teen, like trying to, get the affections of the in high school, the girl that liked him, and trying to not get picked on by Flash, and in New York City, and try to make, help his aunt make ends meet, and like that, and struggling. And it just is a more relatable story. And he would often tell the writers through the years, through the decades, you know a lot of 60s Marvel books covered civil unrest, covered campus demonstrations and stuff like that. That's always kind of been the Marvel way, and I think it is one of the reasons why it resonates, because otherwise, costumes are costumes, powers are powers.
Right, right. It's that human nature and the Stan Lee approach to telling a story, where you feel like he's talking to you.
Hmm.
He does a preamble. He gives you an idea of what you're going to get in this story. True
Hmm.
believers, and
Hmm.
like, here's the adventure. Um, DC doesn't do that. They go like
He was
this.
also
Drop.
Yeah, he also was about the community. I mean, the Excelsior and the Deer Read, all that stuff. He wanted you in with him, so it
Yep.
had that kind of experience, which I really relate to. Um, so so I do want to hit Sandman, but I want to ask you one question before we pivot to Sandman, because they'll connect a little bit. So okay, so when it's bigger than a bed box, when it has a value, whatever, what's your personal, when does it like kick into this other gear where you're putting together runs and like you're covering multiple books and you're hunting issues?
Uh, well, for me personally,
Mhm.
it's the connection, and this is why the comic book community is so wonderful. Uh, Even the passionate gatekeepers who, they're there, and I understand why they're there, right? They they feel like that's theirs. They feel like they connect to it on another level, and they want to protect it. They don't have to, right? But they do.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, it was when I came back from college and I had 4 long boxes. I knew that this was something more than a short-term thing. And I came back home. I actually still have the long boxes. I have phone numbers from college friends on the covers of the long boxes. And I was looking at it and I was just like, I remember the X-Men run was here. And the moment I realized I'm going to have to insure this
Mm,
because I've already put in, $2,000 worth into this collection and I don't want to lose it. And that's what I always say, that's when I feel you go from a gatherer or somebody who likes it into like a full blown, this is more than a hobby. This is
hmm
your collection. Um,
hmm
so which I think is different now. I think the younger folks who just slab everything or they just buy slabs or buy key books, I think they're still collectors. They're just not looking at it as um, I'm going to read everything. That's why they
hmm
have omnibuses.
hmm
I still go back to buy the issues because I want to read them the old fashioned way. I guess I'm old in that sense. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm a weird person in the scheme in that I am like a total omnivore, right? I I'm not like, for investment purposes, slabs matter in my life. For collecting purposes, I want runs. For um, you know, catching up on a story I missed, I love trades and omnibus, right? Like I get down with it all.
right.
So and frankly, actually, like one of my most pivotal experiences was I was at sleepaway camp for the first time ever as a kid, and one of the other kids in the bunk had the Dark Phoenix trade, which was one of the very first trades. Right, there
Yes.
were not a lot of them before then, and I read that thing, and I mean, it was it was over. You know what I mean? Like it was whatever like collecting level I was at as a kid who like enjoyed stories, and it was Spider Man for me as a little kid. It was Spider Man. Oh, my earbud drops out here. But once I read the Dark Phoenix, I mean, it just changed the game on what I thought
Yes.
things can do. Hold one second. I want to just throw this question in here. So we're gonna talk about this in a little bit because actually Manny did a great series on this, and so I'm gonna come back to this question. I just wanted to tell you I saw it, and we're gonna hit that after we talk Sandman here.
Okay.
Um, so let's okay. So when did you discover Sandman? Let's hone in here.
I went to a comic book convention, summer of 90. So Sandman started in 89. By
Yep,
90, I'm hitting conventions, and this one's in New Brunswick.
this is just me flexing. Hold on.
Oh my God,
Sandman
look at that.
one
And it's signed. Oh,
signed and
that's beautiful.
remarked 9-4, but I'll take it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
So
Neil Gaiman
I
doesn't
walk
sound that
in.
much anymore. Yeah.
Oh no, no. So I'm in the show, and this person's like, "Hey, what do you collect?" I'm like, "I collect everything." They're like, "Have you read Sandman?" And I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And they go, "Here." Gave me a copy. I think it was like 9 or 10, it doesn't matter. Gave me a copy. Says, "Go read it." I said, "Well, how much?" They go read it and then come back." I went, read it, came back. He sold me the from 1 to 9 up to that point
Mm,
because I was just like my heart was pounding. Um, I love great stories, and I think when you look at the history of comic books, that I mean, it really has to be in the top 5. That run of Sandman has to be up there with
iconic.
like Walt Simonson's Thor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Someone, as a camp counselor, someone gave me another counselor gave me a lot of camp stories. Another counselor gave me Seasons of Mists, which I think of the arcs is the best arc within that 75. And actually, Game in an interview years later said he actually had that story first. And this is so like post-punk gaming, but he knew that story was going to be a hit, and so he didn't start with it because he
Right.
wanted to develop his readers and build his audience so that when he dropped that, he had his reader, his real core audience along, as opposed
Yes.
to starting
Yes.
with an audience that he thought would fall off if he didn't deliver that level of like, it's not action per se, but like those huge meta swings, you know. But I
Right.
was so, it was the same kind as reading Dark Phoenix. I was so deeply in. I was so
Yeah.
in. And
Yeah.
luckily it was still coming out. New issues were still coming out at that point. So I immediately
Yeah.
jumped on and started picking them up. And yeah, I mean, you were talking about you can't overstate the importance. Like I don't know what the adult comic scene, comics for adults, I don't mean adult comics, but would look like right now if we're not Sandman. Sandman showed that sophisticated, thoughtful, metaphoric, and yet literal at the same time. I mean, it was everything could exist and be commercially successful. And it spawned generations of creators.
Look at Vertigo as an imprint.
Yeah,
It's still around.
yeah. Is it?
It's
No, I
a
don't know if it
subsidiary.
is.
They still do
It's the
Fables
Black
under
Label
it.
now, isn't it?
It's
Oh,
still
maybe, but
Vertigo.
same concept. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm always just super impressed, right? Without that, you don't get Preacher, you don't get Fables, you
No,
didn't get a
no.
hundred bullets, you don't get and DC and on the Marvel side, without Sandman, there wouldn't have been the big ask for Ghost Rider again.
Mm.
Which was that was a great run, the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider,
Mm-hmm,
and then the
mm-hmm.
Darkhold and Blade came back out, and
And Marvel
which
Knight
then
stuff.
spurred on.
And
So yeah,
which led to Jessica Jones in the Max series later on, and
a Punisher in the Max as well as I mean
you know,
the Max
yeah,
line was a response to
yeah,
Vertigo.
yeah. So okay, so let's do this. I'm now gonna if you for whatever reason out there haven't seen it or don't want to see it yet in this format, the Sandman trailer, you can, step away for a minute here. Or if you're watching this after the live, I'll timestamp it and you can jump ahead. But I'm gonna play the teaser trailer August 5th, and we'll watch it together and come back and talk about it briefly here. 1 second.
I am the king of dreams, ruler of the nightmare realm.
What are you doing here, Etty?
He's coming, isn't he?
Yeah.
Morpheus, the Aneromancer. You know the Sandman.
He's a fairy story, Etty.
He's no fairy story. He's back.
Good to know.
What's he got in his hands? Open your hands now!
Forgive me, sire, the palace, the realm. They are not as you left them. With you gone, the realm began to decay and crumble.
The dreams and nightmares no longer seem to recognize their master. Nor remind them. He's free. He's out of his cage.
All right. So, give me your thoughts. We're not gonna listen. This channel will have so many Sandman episodes. I guarantee it. So let's not super deep dive. Just give me your
Right.
big picture thoughts, first impressions.
Big picture thoughts. I stayed away from all the images as they were coming out. I wanted to watch it fresh. Um, so watching the trailer fresh, I am so excited. It makes it, I feel like that 20-year-old kid again watching it for the first time, and it gives me chills. And I'm happy that this is going out to a new generation and everyone can experience what a wonderful storyteller Neil Gaiman is.
Yeah. Yeah, I generally have a similar response. I did see some of the earlier stuff, and I'll be honest, I was a little nervous because I have been waiting for this really my whole adult life. I am still a little skeptical of our casting of our lead. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if it just is a little young or a little, I don't know, something. You know, way back when, this is a long time ago, I know that they, well, topical here, but they wanted Johnny Depp to play Sandman, but like I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago when they wanted to do it,
Right.
which made sense at the time. And so maybe I wanted somebody weirder in that role. But outside of that, I think it visually looks fantastic. And in an era where, and this is, we talk about this a lot on this channel, for all the abundance of here, comic book content we have, a lot of it is starting to look a little similar. The palettes are getting a little like repetitive, and just a little short on the creativity they should have when you can literally do anything. This
Correct.
looks like it's going to flex creative muscle, which I think is critical. And my biggest concern was, it's a story. While it's a great story, propulsion is not at the core of Sandman, right? Like we have multiple issues where you can just kind of be like, theorizing inside a dream. So that's
Right.
concerning. It looks like they found a way to get propulsion. And yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. I do think this was cut for the fans. It does feel like for those of us that saw the stills and were a little worried, they gave us this. I wonder how it
Right.
resonates with people who haven't read it. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I would really be interested in a young person's take when they first watch it, right? Especially
Mhm.
not reading the books. My kids, it's too late. I have a 20-year-old and a 14-year-old. They've already read Sandman. I mean, it was either that or they don't get fed. So um, it was, but to be able to see, and it's funny. I'm okay with the youth of the character, right? Because the one thing is, remember, Destiny is the oldest, then it's
Mm,
Death, and Death
mm,
is portrayed as a young woman. So
mhm,
how
mhm.
is Dream
Yeah, that's
going to
fair.
look older than his, youthful, beautiful sister? Which I can't wait to see
Yeah.
Death on screen.
And look, they're immortal concepts of eternity, so they can look however they're gonna look. I
Right.
just, so for sure that doesn't matter. And please save me I'm not even trying to be like anything about this, but like save me the criticisms about any like gender cross casting or racial cross. It's like they're immortal concepts. Shut up. I mean, like, come
But,
on.
but you
And
see,
it's
that's the best
canon, and
part.
it's canon in the book.
Right.
Like they change forms constantly.
It's not just that, right? It's still our community. It's unfortunately it's baked into um, who how it all started, right? Where there was that creepy guy in the back of the store who was just like, "What are you here? What are you looking for?" And like he was very protective of his book. So when he shared it with you and you bought it, you were now protective of that story. So the
Yeah.
gatekeeping kind of perpetuates in that way. I mean, we do it
Yes.
with the movies, the TV shows. I always take this approach. I love everything. I was telling you, I love Academy Award winning Suicide Squad. I
Right,
know
right,
it's
right,
not
right.
the best movie, but I
Right.
can enjoy it for what it is.
Wait, explain that because you were telling me before we went on air. What does it mean when you say Academy Award winning Suicide Squad? Because I think it is a great point.
It's so it is. Yeah, you see all the TikToks, videos, YouTube ranking of DCEU movies, uh, and Suicide Squad is always at the bottom. But we tend to forget that there were artists working on the film, right? Besides the director and the lighting people and the on-screen talent, you had um, makeup designers who won an Academy Award for what they did with Killer Croc. So when I watch that movie, and I do watch it every once in a while, I'm still in awe of the design and how they pulled it off.
Mhm.
And again, I am the opposite of a gatekeeper. I believe let's get as many people in. And even if we disagree, at least we're all in here together.
Listen, I totally agree. I also think what did you say? The passionate gatekeepers. I think that is the kindest way you could possibly say it. I have less tolerance for it, and maybe I should have a more supportive heart for it. I really don't. I think it's ridiculous, and I'll tell you why. It's a really it's actually I think an important reason, and it isn't. Well, I won't preamble it. I think that when you have when you feel like the underdog, when you feel like the outsider, and you find something that's yours, then you protect that because it makes you feel connected, because it makes you feel like belonging. And I think for a lot of fans, they it's almost like they can't accept that they could actually be the cool kids now. Like they can't accept that what they loved so passionately, what they defended so passionately, they won the argument. People agree with you. Let people
Right.
share in that with you. You're choosing to stay sort of victimized by it. You're choosing to stay like ostracized instead of realizing, no, like great, you loved something and you had passion for it, and now people agree with you and you can connect with them on it. And I think it's a really important point and something I've been advocating recently on this channel. And this is a little bit of an evolving take, so bear with me, but we've got to switch. We were drowning. We needed a life jacket. We had nothing. We had that Batman movie, and then stuff went away for a while. And then we got the Spider-Man Maguire things, and stuff went away. We got the Nolan Batman, and eventually the waters broke, right?
Right.
I feel like we've got to switch from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. We have so much content now. It's okay. You could not like one of them. That's okay.
Right.
Let other people like it. That's
Right.
okay. I mean, it's one thing if you think it's genuinely a disservice, like they're creating something objectively bad, but it's another thing if it's just not the way you personally wish it was. What do you think about all that?
I can appreciate it, right? So I'll put it in this context. Grew up Spanish. Uh, Racial slurs to a Spanish person, they get hurled all the time, right? So by the time I started working, I had a boss when I walked in first day, and he said, "Oh, who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm your assistant manager." And he's like, "I asked for assistant manager. They sent me up and said the S
Right.
word, right?"
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, "Okay." See, I took it as you don't know any better. So
Mhm.
I took it as an okay, smart Spanish person to just say, I'm going to have to educate you. And every
Mhm.
day I would go in and I would talk to Richie. And it got to the point where, uh, as his assistant manager, I was in charge of hiring. So the very first salesperson, I made sure it was a black man,
Mhm.
and they butted heads like this. But sure enough, after a while, Richie understood you don't have to pretend to be Howard Stern. You could just be Richie, right? You
Mhm.
don't have to say racial epithets. That doesn't make you cool, like you were saying.
Mhm.
The way I see gatekeepers is kind of the same way. Um, I treat them with the same love and respect I would expect back in return. And
Mhm.
they gatekeep, and they're like all the hate that's going towards the young actress playing Riva on Obi-Wan. There's no place for it. but let's talk about it. Like I
Mhm.
and I know people are like they go back with more venom, and I'm the type that says, let's watch it. Let's
Yeah.
I understand you're frustrated. You don't want to see a black character. Give it time. And
Yeah,
eventually,
but wait. It's one thing to say you don't like something being changed. That specific character you're talking about in a galaxy far, far away filled with aliens, they don't want black people. Like, come on, man. Whatever. I'm not even. Listen. I respect your patience and your
right.
perspective. I don't have patience like that. Okay. Let's. I want to double back to Marianne's question that she posed a little bit on insurance comics. So one of the series you did that I thought was great on TikTok was you did a series on essentially, not to be morbid about it, but like preparing your collection for after you. What do you want to do with
Correct.
your collection? And can you tell us a little bit about how that series came about, some of the broad points, and then the specifics of insuring your collection?
Sure. So there's a young person on TikTok, and her dad passed away,
Okay,
and
I know who you're
he
talking
she
about.
left he left her his entire comic book collection, but with no instructions.
Right.
Just there's a whole container full of comic books. They're yours, and she is overwhelmed. You could tell she's overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
she did her research and she got onto whatnot and she's selling the books as best as she can. But like that turns something on. Like I talked to my daughter from when she was like 4. This is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And my son is like, well, half of it's mine now, which means I have to update my will to ensure that he gets his half. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but with that being said, and there's already discussion that she wants she wants he could have the house, she wants the comic book collection. I'm like, ease your roll. Like
Yeah, I'm
the
in
the
similar conversations right now, but yeah, go on. Go on.
so yeah, that is she inspired me to talk about it because I already did talk to my daughter. Like, here's the comic book. There, I have a comic book database, comic base, where I enter in the comic books. I update the values, um, so that she knows if something were to happen to me, what the value is. And we've
Mhm.
talked about um, selling it to a wholesaler versus keeping it. Like, to me, it's like, what are your plans when this comes to you so that you are aware? And she's like, I'm keeping it. And I'm like, okay, just so that you understand, when you say you're keeping it, that means you're going to continue paying insurance. You're going to need something larger than a bread box because this is huge.
Yeah.
It's 70 long boxes, and not even
I think I have a
counting
big
the.
collection. Lordy, 70 long boxes. I want
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
digging through your long boxes one day. That is wow. All
But I
right.
only bought what I liked, right? So could you
Mhm.
imagine if I was like a hoarder? And I mean, I will go to a yard sale and I will say how much for everything.
Did you
And
ever take breaks? Did you ever do gaps in your collection? See, I have
yes, yes.
years where I stopped and then came back and stopped and came back.
2002, when my daughter was born, like it's clear line.
Mhm.
There's no comic books for like 2 years. Now I've gone back and
Mhm.
filled it in,
Mhm.
and the same thing in '08 when my son was born. There's a gap. Um, Even so, like my sister helped out. She was like, "Let's keep buying," because she loved reading the books with me.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, no, my sister was very supportive of the habit,
That's
um,
cool.
and she read almost everything that's in here, like all the Wonder Womans, all the X-Men, all the Teen Titans, Batman. So she's as much of a collector. It's it's all here, and it's all going to wind up going to my daughter and son. Uh, they'll work it out. But yeah, like understand when I'm not here, insure it, have it a place for it, and if you can't, here's what you can do. You can sell
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
You can go to someone else and ask them to sell it, and they'll get a percentage. Like, here are all your options. I don't I don't want to leave her and him in the lurch where they're with their grief, they're going to make a bad decision.
Mhm.
So I'm a firm believer we have to have the conversation. And if you don't have kids, with your spouse, your significant other, your parents, any loved one who's going to be around to take care of your stuff when you're gone.
Yeah, I'd echo, and this is really important. We forget as collectors how much we know that we've learned over years that we now treat as common knowledge, and it is not common knowledge.
Right.
I mean, variants, slabs, newsstands, condition sensitive, historical books, keys, whatever. We treat all that like, oh yeah, sure. That's
Right.
years and years and years of accumulated knowledge to think you're going to pass it on to someone else and they're going to know what to do with it and not get taken advantage of, or not be at least overwhelmed, even if they aren't taken advantage of. I think it's a really, it's heavy, but it's really thoughtful, and I'm definitely in the process myself. So
Yeah.
2 minutes specific question to the specific question. How did you go about getting your comics insured? Like, can you give us some nuts and bolts of just like what the process was? Or
So I went with collectors insurance, right? So for them, to me, it's the easiest one. Don't go through State Farm. Don't go through like Allstate. I went with a collector's insurance policy, and what they said is, we don't need a list. Tell us what your collection is worth, and we'll insure it for that amount. In the end, you have to insure it for how much, not what it's worth right now, what it's going to cost you to get everything back if you lose it, because there's two different values. So Comic Base gives me the bottom number, what the current value is using Comic Avenue and I believe auctions. Then,
okay.
yeah, then I double it, because the honest thing is, the way the market is right now, books are soaring up and coming back down quickly. They are.
Yeah.
Or as more people are slabbing books, it's still driving up the price of the other books, because those books are not in circulation, because people are holding on to their slabs, or they're selling their slabs for a premium. So, yeah, then you and plus it's what you afford, what you can afford.
Yeah.
But I believe it's just like life insurance. It's just like insuring your house, your apartment, your car. Be thoughtful, be conscious, but be proactive. People have beautiful pop collections that are worth thousands of dollars. Please insure it. Like, I can't say it enough. I mean, you have things like albums, coin collection. To just have it and not protect it is it could be a mistake, and that would make me sad if somebody were to lose it and not get back what they deserve.
But so insuring it and then having some estimated value of it, if in your will it's being passed on to somebody or being split in a certain way or whatever, having that detailed and knowing what that value is, or if you have specific issues, you're like, hey, I'm fine if you do sell them. You're very welcome. Thanks for hanging with us. Or if there's certain books where you think, whether it's for sentimental reasons or it's just financial wisdom, maybe you've got I have a Silver Age Spideys that I'm like, I'm going to be very specific. Do you want to, like 10 years later, if you want to sell them, don't sell them on my passing. You're going to be giving up,
Yeah, I find
money.
that interesting, because it's, if, I would, everyone is different. I would actually, if you're absolutely, you can't get money from anywhere else, yes, take the first Silver Age Two-Face and sell it. It's $1,000. It's $950. Yeah, go get rid of it. And it's only one book. You still have the rest of the collection. Like, it would upset me more if you wind up selling like a run of Detective. Just You could sell the whole thing for $1,000 possibly, and then you don't have any Detective.
That's an interesting. So okay, so I'm looking at sort of how long we've been going and the topics I wanted to hit, and I did want to have a whole conversation on the current market, but maybe I'm gonna shelve that
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot. It deserves its own time, because you're saying some really a lot of fertile ground for deeper conversation. Because I would argue that the difference is there are going to be times in the economy, and we may be entering one real soon, where you can pick up entire runs for pennies, but still can't pick up that
Keys.
Spidey number
Yeah.
4 or whatever.
Right.
So so that's part of that thinking. But I think this is ground for a really future conversation, which I hope you will come back on to have. I did want to hit one topic, and you can go into this as much detail or as little as you'd like. You are also open on your TikTok account about mental health, which is something our channel and definitely we focus on occasion, and I think is a big part of our again, that supportive community. To what extent, if any, have comics played a role in mental health in your life, or if not to the personal, to the kind of macro in community in relationship to mental health? And I will give you the floor, sir.
So thank you. I appreciate it. And I am very passionate about talking about mental health. I am bipolar. I was diagnosed bipolar back in 2013. And when I was diagnosed, um, obviously I hit a low point. Um, it made sense. My whole life made sense. And I was really upset that I didn't seek out help earlier, in the sense that I feel I could have reined in certain aspects of my personality um, a lot earlier and maybe had an even better life. I am very happy with my life, but it could have been better. But then the one things that they tell you when you're bipolar is you really want to stay in the moment. So in staying in the moment, being here right now with you talking about this is absolutely wonderful. And there's people in our community who they may hear it all the time. It's on TV. It's there. It's in the schools. They talk about, how are you feeling? Mental health. Talk to your friends, your teachers. Um, Find people that you care and respect about, and talk to them about everything or anything. You could give them slivers. You don't have to give everyone, the whole macro, right? You don't have to go and say, I was abused, me personally, when I was young. But you don't have to go announce that to everyone. I've come to terms with it. Um, but with knowing that and knowing how that contributed to my trauma and uh, my ups and downs,
Mhm.
I'm good. And the only reason why I'm good is because I can talk about it freely. Um, Folks who high anxiety, and what's funny, a lot of us in this community are suffering with
Mhm.
something or another, which is why we
Mhm.
connect so well with these characters sometimes. Their pain is our pain. Where the people who suffer mental illness actually are quite good at being very empathetic. So we
Mhm.
see our characters struggle and we can empathize. And even if you're not, then you're a healthy human, you'll still empathize. And that's wonderful. To me, that's where we as a community can really continue to help. Um, you see the issues, you read the comic, and you're like, oh, I saw, Jill looking a little sad the other day. And here's this character, she's sad, and her friend went to talk to her. Maybe I can. And I think we see that more in today's comics than ever before, where they're very conscious of the mental health aspect, because you do see it in some of the stories.
I have nothing more poignant to add than that. I really want to thank you for your time. It's been awesome having you on. I knew we'd have a great conversation. We did. Right back at you. and I hope you'll come back on and we can continue to dialogue. Thanks for everyone who hung with us on the live. If you're seeing this after the live, throw in comments. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. I always forget to say it, but like seriously, we're trying to build something. I got more stuff coming this week. So thanks everybody. Have a good night.